Toast, 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 toast. Let's go. What's up? Saturday night. We're covering the substance tonight. That was Rooks G with the welcoming. Here's First Ascension. We're going to get started right after this. Hope everybody's well on Saturday night. January, New Year. Let's go. Let's cover some weird, wild movies. Rooks G, R-O-X-G. Shouts out to our friend out there. Hootie hoo, that's right. Hootie hoo. Hootie hoo, Jethro. Hey, shouts out to his family. That's right, we do it live. We do it live. We do it live. Cheers, everybody out there. That's right, taking us out. Taking us in. Taking us in, Rooks G. That's Rooks G playing us in. What's that mean, to play us in? To play us in. All right, go, go. There's Rooks G playing us in there with First Ascension. Yo, tonight we're doing a weird, wacky, wild movie. We're covering The Substance. This is the new Demi Moore movie. Demi Moore. With the Koala girl from Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I checked this out today. Shouts out to Jethro for putting me onto this movie. So I checked it out. And we got an original movie here. It's original, but I'm going to talk about a bunch of the, I think, prerequisites, which we've covered. We've covered a lot of the prerequisites for understanding this movie. And along the way, I'm going to try to get to a couple other things here. Bret Easton Ellis's Imperial Bedrooms, and also Charles Perrault's Fairy Tales. I read this book today because I got onto it because of the book Sons of Cain that I talked about a long time ago, which is the book on the history of serial killers. And there's a lot in the fairy tales that has a kind of crossover with this, especially with Bluebeard, Griselda. It's got Cinderella, and it's got Sleeping Beauty of the Wood, a bunch of other stuff. But it's interesting going back and reading the fairy tales, and they talk about this in the introduction and in the preface to the book, that sometimes these fairy tales, in a way, looking into deep symbolism in fairy tales and folk tales, sort of is a contention point with these. But the reason that I'm bringing this into the substance and the Bret Easton Ellis book, which is the last Bret Easton Ellis book that we need to cover. We've covered all the other ones. Oh, so this is it. This is the last one. We've covered Less Than Zero, American Psycho, Glamorama, The Informers, The Shards. We've covered Lunar Park. We've covered all of them. We've even talked about what's the second one? What's it called? We've covered all the Bret Easton Ellis books. But this is the last one, and this is a sequel to Less Than Zero. And it's really a quick read. It's self-stylized as a sort of Raymond Chandler-esque book with a sort of simpler diction and vernacular. But it's interesting because one of the things that comes out of the book is that depth ends up being more surface material. And I think that is a good way to start by talking, when we talk about this movie, the substance. And this movie, I think this was Demi Moore's first award, and not that really matters for the movie, but it's her first award that she's won. I think she won a Golden Globe for it. And of course, she's going to be up for an Oscar for this movie, and I would not be surprised if she wins. I'll have to see who the other people are. I'm really good at, not that this is my only skill. This is my only skill. I'm good at predicting Oscars, who will win and who should win. And I'm not really sure yet if she should win. Yeah, I've covered Chinatown. But I'm not sure if she should win, but I think that she will be up for it because this is an interesting role, and there's a lot in that. There are a number of prerequisites for understanding the movie, one of which, the most obvious one, is actually the Neon Demon, which we just covered, and that's also wild because it's got Elle Fanning, and I just went and saw the Complete Unknown movie, which is the movie about Bob Dylan, which I might get to at the end, but that might be a separate analysis. So that's the Timothée Chalamet movie about Bob Dylan, which I just went and saw. And so she's in that playing his girlfriend or something. But it's interesting. The synchro is heavy with this, especially when talking about postmodernism through the current era. And one of the things that somebody just brought up in the chat there is the events going on in L.A., and I'm reading through Don DeLillo, as people call him. I always call him Don DeLillo. So if you don't like the way I say it, then I've covered all. I think this is also the last Don DeLillo book that we haven't covered. This is it. We've covered all the other ones, I think. Maybe Zero K. We haven't. I've certainly read them all. But Underworld is his magnum opus, and so I'm really taking my time with it because there's also a lot of there's information overload, the world hum as he calls it. And so what's interesting is that everything I can think of when reading the book, every sort of tangent appears within the context of this narrative. And one of those things is LA and fire, and that occurs within the book. It's very crazy. This is like, we'll be getting to this one later on down the road, but this is what Simulacra and Simulation sort of deals with in terms of the post through the triple postmodern world, the era of the post or the war on the self, now that we live in post war on terror era, postmodernism. And this certainly the way that things occur in a synchronistic fashion is astounding. It's really, really astounding. So I think that's a good place to start with the substance. So let's talk about the substance. So this movie came out this year, and it is Demi Moore and Margaret Qualley, who is the daughter of Andy McDowell. It's also got Dennis Quaid. And Dennis Quaid is playing a character named Harvey, which is obviously supposed to be synonymous with Warvey Heinstein, obviously, when you watch the film. Not too obvious, but it seems to be that would be the provenance of his name within the film. And what we have here is that we have the Neon Demon as a good prerequisite for this, but also Eric. If you don't remember Eric Pritz's video, "Call on Me," with the sample from Steve Winwood, the "Call on Me" video from 2004, which was big when I was living in England, and I've seen him live. I saw him at, where did I see him? Homelands Festival or something. But, the video is a great music video. It's basically it's an 80s workout video, and that obviously played a part in the aesthetic template or the mood board for this movie. We also have American Horror Story 84, which we've covered. The Jane Fonda workout series obviously plays a role in this as well. But as usual, we have a kind of meta narrative on the nature of celebrity and on what it means to be young and famous. What is Lana Del Rey sing? In the garden of gods and monsters, I was an angel. What is Lana Del Rey sing? It's a kind of updated, nostalgic look at a Lana Del Rey lyric mixed in with hypercolor Asics shoes. And that's essentially the movie. It's also body horror, and it's a pretty shocking movie. Now, I'm not a fan of body horror. I don't like that type of thing. I don't like things like Videodrome and stuff like that. It's just not it's just not the type of movie that I'm into. Yeah, the Star Whackers. They're Star Whackers, says Randy Quaid. Well, Demi Moore plays a celebrity named Elizabeth Sparkle. We also get what are the other ones? Josie and the Pussycats. There was another one that came out a few years ago called Lux. Was it Lux Eterna with Natalie Portman? We like from time to time in Hollywood, they love making artistic statements on themselves and what it means to be young or what fame is. And also it goes into the nature of love, which is actually just sort of adoration and obsession with celebrities as stars. And the first thing that we see in the movie is we see an egg yolk. This is a pretty interesting movie. And visually speaking, it's really interesting. It has a sense of visual variety in it, and it gets to be a little much. The movie is too long. I know I'm not doing just a simple basic review here, but the movie is too long, and the end of the movie ends up being a kind of John Merrick Elephant Man, amalgamation of characters. It's a lot like The Thing at the end, actually. The Thing, there's a number of different things that we can look into when we look at this movie. But Dennis Quaid has had a year this year. I know he did the Reagan movie. That's not huge, but he's another one of these characters like Demi Moore. I think that what happens with these celebrities is that they kind of grow stale, and then they end up getting a new agent, and then they get put into experimental films. And this one is certainly experimental in a sense. It actually reads like a Justice video. If you ever seen who's the Romain Gavray, the guy who directed the Justice videos. He did one for Is Tropical, a bunch of electronic music, and it kind of reads like that. That guy also directed a movie that Claire from Canada put me on to earlier this year called Athena, which was actually really good. And this one is less societal and less. It's not as big. It reads more like a stage play when we watch it, set pieces. But it's clearly French. And when we watch the movie, what's interesting is that it's set in L.A. and it looks like L.A. and it sort of comes off with the sheen of L.A. But there's something missing. There's something that's other in the film, and I think that is due to the fact that the movie was filmed in France, and it's another. I've talked about this kind of endlessly recently about films that have a European look to them, but they are supposed to be filmed in the United States, and that's obviously for reasons of location reasons. But I was just watching The Ghostwriter again last night, the Polanski movie with Ewan McGregor, where it's a Tony Blair, Sherry Blair sort of CIA statement with Tom Wilkinson, who just passed away, R.I.P. this past year. He was a great actor, but again, it gives a sense of other. There's a distance between the audience and the characters in the movie, and then the surface material. And yes, Kristen, this movie is the most degen movie we could. It's pretty raw. It's not for the family, folks. Not at all. The movie is mainly centered. What's crazy about it? Okay, let me find a starting place here. What's crazy about this movie is that it's really centered on the visual aspect of film as a medium, and on sort of network TV, film, and the visual sheen that sort of shimmers from celebrities in the artistic medium of cinema. But there is a sense of distance where something is not quite right, and that is due to that's unified with the theme, because it is obviously we have a character played by Demi Moore, Elizabeth Sparkle, who is two characters. We have two actresses playing one character. It makes me think of Being John Malkovich, where what's crazy about that movie, before I get back to the substance, is that Being John Malkovich is a very good movie, and it's actually, what's really great about it, especially as far as the performances are concerned, what's great about it is that John Cusack plays Malkovich, and when we're watching Malcatraz in the movie, it's like I believe that it's Malcatraz being puppeteered by John Cusack, the actor character in the film. So the dance of disillusionment and despair in the film, I thought really was a great performance, and that is kind of like what this movie is, because we have a young actress and we have Demi Moore, and they're both playing the same role, but they're two different physical characters, and that's where we go with the whole film. So there's a lot of Teeter Peel in this and eternal youth, but it's physicalized and externalized as an experimental serum. So the movie starts off with an egg yolk. We see kind of blue, and we see an egg yolk, and then we see this thing called the substance, which is injected. It's called the substance, injected into the egg yolk, and we see some sort of chemical reaction taking place. We hear squishy, squanchy noises, and the egg yolk splits into two. So now we have two eggs. Next thing we see is a God's eye view of a kind of what we figure out is Hollywood Boulevard, and we see workmen placing the various angles of the star on the sidewalk. They fill in the star. We see this sort of time-lapse process of them filling in the star, and so we see a star on the Walk of Fame, and this is Elizabeth Sparkle. And then we see a kind of montage time-lapse of what happens to the celebrity star over time, which is that first people come and they take pictures. Then we hear kind of audio of them talking about the star. Then we hear them asking for directions. Then the star begins to get cracked. Then we see people walking over it. Then eventually there's a homeless guy with a cart walking over it. There's a hobo demon walking over the star. Then it gets even more cracked. Then somebody drops a cheeseburger, and there's ketchup spread, which is blood, which looks like blood, which is going to appear later on in the film in a sort of Carrie nod, Stephen King Carrie nod. And then we see that obviously the symbolism is skin deep here. We know that we haven't even met the actress yet, the actress within the movie, but we know that this is a sort of quick preface, epigraphic statement on the nature of celebrity and how people come in and out of favor. And eventually, they are simply fodder for the hordes of the vulgaris walking down Hollywood Boulevard, spilling their soy burgers and their meat cubes and meat blood all over the star. And so this is skin deep, because not only is this true, but it is also literally like that is what the celebrities are there for, and what they crave, but also what they want attention for and what they want to escape from. And there is no escape from the cracks and crevices of time, which is what we're going to see happen to Demi Moore. Now, next shot, we really see Demi Moore, and she is in a kind of pseudo 80s workout video, which is a part of a morning show, and she's got these backup dancers. It's a lot like the Key and Peele skit, which is very funny when they're doing the 80s aerobics. But this is now, it's current day, even though it looks like the 80s. And we see that she's been around since the 80s. So she's been a big celebrity. She's been a huge star, but now she's getting a little older. And then the sequence ends, and she walks down a room 237, eyes wide shut type of hallway, where we have a mesmeric sort of, the dimensions are askew, and our perspective changes, and we don't know whether we're at the beginning of the tunnel or at the end of the tunnel. And she walks into this really shining level bathroom, and the ladies' room is out, so she goes to the men's bathroom. She's in a stall, and we see Dennis Quaid walk in. Dennis Quaid walks in a kind of really loud, what's that guy's name? Christopher Bailey. Who's the guy who does Burberry? Sort of modern day Gucci aesthetic, which has changed over the past few years, suit, and he's on his cell phone, and he gets right up in the camera. So one of the things that they love doing in film, and I noticed this is equivalent to what I noticed last night watching football, which is that the commentator pointed out, and I can't help but notice it every time, which is that when people catch the ball in a college football game, they always jump. Like, it doesn't matter if the pass is right to them, they still jump. They got to jump off the ground. They say, why are you jumping? Well, it's the same with films, in the sense that whenever we want to portray somebody, whenever we want to indicate to the audience that the character is grotesque, we have them come right up into the camera. Now, one of the ways this really relates to, I think, something like Requiem for a Dream by Darren Aronofsky. That really did influence filmmaking for the past, when did that come out? 2000, 2001. For the past, quarter of a century, filmmaking has been really influenced by that sort of camera work. We go from stationary cameras to handheld cameras. Things get jumpy. We have the Paul Greengrass sort of Jason Bourne, first-person perspective. We're following the character sort of camera work. But we also have the right up into the camera grotesque work, where certain aspects of the face are really emphasized. And so there's no question that this character is a Hollywood network TV producer, and he's supposed to be the kind of inhuman character living in another person's skin. But the irony is that he is a guy, and that we're going to get to characters who are really living in other people's skin in the rest of the film, and then we're going to get multiple characters living in a really total monstrosity, this freakish monstrosity at the end of the film. So Dennis Quaid is talking about how he needs a new star. Of course, they need a new star. He needs somebody younger to be the new Elizabeth Sparkle. So he's going to put out an audition. And Elizabeth Sparkle, Demi Moore, goes to a doctor's appointment. And what's really I really liked about her performance in this is that, if you're going to have a movie about a movie star who is a fading movie star, fading in terms of the public spotlight, fading in terms of her output and her work, but also fading in terms of her very humanity or human skin, then you're going to have an actress who really bears it all in the movie, and she really does do that. And I think that this is also supposed to be a kind of nod to where she really started to decline in Hollywood, which was around the movie Striptease, if you remember that. Demi Moore was a huge star. She was one of these $20 million stars. She was in G.I. Jane with Ridley Scott. I remember that because they filmed it. She was with Bruce Willis, and they were at the Capitol here, and I remember that they were with their family, and they were filming it. But remember that she was big. She was very big. She had really broken through with the movie Ghost. There's also a kind of nod to Ghost in this movie because there's the kind of claymation, the forming of a new entity. And of course, in the movie Ghost, there's the sexualized scenes of which are really indicative of her sort of timeless love for the Patrick Swayze character who's died. It goes, Ghost isn't a bad movie. I mean, he is, they're making pottery together. It was very weird. It was a very odd thing to have. But that, I'm sure, like big pottery really exploded after that. But she's doing that because that's an external show of the invisible world that she can't see, which is the invisible Patrick Swayze as a ghost character in that movie. Well, in this, she is the clay modeling is really herself. She's forming a new person herself, and so she is. She's sitting on this table she's sitting on the doctor's table or whatever. And she's getting her. She's getting examined, and the doctor's saying, "Really, there's nothing wrong with you, whatever." And then we see this physician's assistant who is a young guy. He looks a little like, what's that guy's name who was in the Goldfinch? He looks a little bit like that. He's not that character, but he has the kind of, it reminded me also of a Bret Easton Ellis type of aesthetic that you get from the books, which is a kind of mask of one's own face. It looks like we're supposed to see that this is a physician's assistant who's a young Hollywood guy, but his face looks kind of like almost like it was in a lab grown, like it's like wet, and it's like a mask. And he starts feeling her spine and says, "Yes, you're a perfect candidate." And then when she gets out of the doctor's office, she finds in her coat pocket that there's a piece of paper wrapped up with a thumb drive, and it says something like, "This changed my life, or you will thank me later." So she goes home and she throws it in the trash, which is also, obviously, there's some shallow depth symbolism here, purposefully so, in the movie, where she throws the thumb drive into the depths of the trash can, and the trash can is filled with like food and chicken bones, and that's later what's going to be filled, what she's going to purposely fill her insides with, which I'm going to get to later, which is crazy, but also shows the kind of carcass nature of where she's going as a character in this. But it's a depth. It's into the bowels of the trash can, but it's not deep enough for her to forget about. And she pulls it back out, and then she starts to go through the thumb drive, and she makes the order. She realizes that this is a thing that's mysterious, and that basically she's going away. She's going away. Her time has passed. So she ends up going to this strange address, and the strange address is like a half address somewhere in Hollywood, which is actually France, and she ends up at like a business store grate, which only opens about halfway. She opens it with an electronic key card, but it only opens about a quarter or a half of the way. And this is also a nice touch, because she's decked out in, Valentino or whatever, and she is forced to get on the ground to crawl into this like tunnel thing. And when she gets into the tunnel, she walks through it, and she ends up in this futuristic dystopian, very Cronenberg-like, but also kind of 2001 Space Odyssey type of shining, glinting room with, tiled room. And there are all these safety deposit boxes, and she has a number. So she clicks on it, and she pulls out the package, and then she takes that home. I think the tiled room with the safety deposit boxes is supposed to show that, in a way, it's like she's she's going to her own morgue, and she's going to pull out her own remains, but also that this is like surface level valuable, as if it's a safety deposit box, but the safety deposit box is her her own youth, or her own body, her own skin, control over her own body. And so then she goes home, she opens it up, and she's presented with a set of instructions, and the instructions basically tell her, she opens a box, and it's like one of those things that ladies order, the food that they order delivered, like it's all pre-prepared in the box or whatever. It's like that, but it's got a syringe, a set of basic instructions, like a turkey baster thing, a tie off. So there's also an element of an allusion to addiction here, like she's addicted to looking good, she's addicted to her own body and to her own fame, but she ends up tying herself off like she's gonna mainline heroin, but it ends up being the substance. And she's told in the instructions that basically it's 7 days on, 7 days off. So she's Demi Moore, and she's there for 7 days, and then when she is whatever happens, that has 7 days. There's also food for the other, and there's food for her, and that's through a drip. It's like soy slop meat cube drip food that they put into the body, very Cronenbergian, and then the rules are basically that you can't forget. Let me see if I can pull this up. There's a good shot of the rules here. The rules are that you can't forget that remember you are one. Here it is. Remember you are one. So she's opening her box here, and she gets her various things, and she lays it out on the table and says, remember you are one. So here we have the obvious break on through to the other side, sort of Gnostic rebuilding of oneself, and she's got to escape from her prison planet skin suit, but that's sort of taken for granted in a movie like this, I think. And what I think is really, really clever about the movie is that, especially up to this point, you're really compelled to watch it because you want to know what is the horror that she's going to uncover here. What is the horror that she's going to birth, and what is this going to do to her? And also, not only that, but the fact that I like movies like this because, to me, I think that one level of this kind of assumes of the audience that the audience, you would assume in level one that, I did Nosferatu last week, that level one would be like, oh, we have a commentary on celebrities and how they want to be young. But we get past that. And then now we assume that the audience already knows this, and we're doing a critique of all of this. But what's going to be the deeper level of this? And I like this because the deeper level ends up being sort of the most shallow thing. So there's no lesson to be told for the audience, and then you realize that really that just like you thought from the beginning, that the audience functions as voyeur for the star in the meta narrative plot of watching Demi Moore sort of play herself through two different levels in the film. So it's pretty clever. I think it's pretty clever. So she takes out this the materials, and she shoots the substance into herself, and from there the movie really takes a turn because we see a close-up of her eyeball. Her eyeball is sort of turning into it's a split. We see a split personality. We see a split person. We see the egg is splitting into two different entities, and there are two different eye colors. And then she collapses on the ground, and then from her back, and listen, Demi Moore is fully she's fully Nikado in this film, and I think that one thing about the movie, one thing about a film like this is it's tempting to say that this is a kind of, self-referential Skinamax movie about celebrities and seeing them Nikado. But we get past that because we're actually seeing Demi Moore a pretty, in her natural state in the film as the actress, and that's sort of the point that we have to get to in the film, and it's actually pretty clever, I think. But here comes the grody parts. So now her back skin on her spine splits open, and we see a body birthed out of her skin, and this is a new body. So she's given birth from her backbone, And now we get this Margaret Qualley new character whose name is Sue, and she is the younger, perfect-looking version of Demi Moore, but she is not Demi Moore, but she is the same. They are the same person. So again, we get a doppelganger here. This is a real doppelganger. Now, you can't escape the fact that the movie is also obviously taken from the Picture of Dorian Gray, which I've covered. I covered A Picture of Dorian Gray along with the Surrealist and Velvet Buzzsaw, and then the Surrealistic Manifesto, Andre Breton, and all that. You can go back to that stream on Dorian Gray. But the character does truly a Dorian Gray here, which is she ends up hiding away her real self in an interior dark room within that she constructs within her own high-rise apartment overlooking this sanitized skyline of France/LA. And what ends up happening is the more she wants to be young and the more beautiful she is, she has to take this spinal fluid from the Demi Moore character and inject it into herself. So this is her life force. So instead of doing straight up Drino from the Guy Neal plan, instead this is spinal fluid, and that allows her, she's actually taking it from herself so that she can stay younger. So she locks up Demi Moore, the body of Demi Moore, in this room that she makes, this vault. So here's another vault. There was the vault with the like sort of bank vault, morgue, and now we have the interior room within a room. And whenever we have rooms, obviously in film or literature, they always function as an exterior symbol of the psyche. So we have a secret locked up within herself. And to add to that, she has locked up herself within herself. So she goes to an audition. She makes it. Dennis Quaid says, Dennis Quaid's a real creep character in this. He's eating prawns and his slop is going everywhere. And there's food slop and orange gunk everywhere. And he's wearing his suits and he's in his boardroom with all the sort of men in black. And they are his functionaries in Hollywood. He even has a personal assistant. The personal assistant has a name like Elizabeth or something, and he's like, Elizabeth, that's too long. Your new name is Jen or something, because he has the power over naming people like he's some sort of proto demigod or Demi Moore or demigod, looking over his principality in this sanitized Hollywood place. And what I really thought about while watching this is one thing that occurred to me when watching this is, who cares? Like, I mean, I'm not saying that about the analysis or the movie, but I'm saying the lengths that these people, and I know it's a film, but it's obviously supposed to be a commentary on Hollywood or just on the nature of wanting to live forever in a perfect body. But who cares? They just go to these grotesque lengths. Even the making of the film itself is showing what people are willing to do in a symbolic or esoteric sense. Who cares about these people? It's like, I don't know. Like, imagine being at a party or something and you're talking to people and it's like, you're not young enough or something, you're in your 40s and you're not young enough for the person you're talking. It's just weird. Who gives a shit? Right? Just be yourself and just, who wants a plastic face? Who wants to wear a mask of their own skin? Except for the protagonist of the novel that I'm trying to get published, Monarch, that's what it's all about. He wears a mask of his own face, but that's because he's a MK Delta most dangerous game serial killer. But I mean, just who gives a shit? Like, you don't have the newest Gucci or something. I mean, that's pretty cool if you can have that, but who gives a shit? You know what I'm saying? And there's a real dichotomy between the Demi Moore character, the Qualley character, and the neighbors that she lives with, and then the other people that she says. I mean, this is what Neon Demon is about and all this stuff. And I know that we're supposed to see through that it's all skin deep and all that. But it's just, I think that that's part of the postmodern malaise that we see. And you know that you probably watching this are like, exactly, who gives a shit? I mean, who honestly would give a shit? But there are people that do this. Right? The whole industry is built on this. Why? Who cares? I mean, I understand, you know, like if you're an old lady, if you are a wealthy old lady and you know you have grandkids or something and you want to get you know, you want to, and you get your, of course, ladies get their hair done, right? And you want to do all the normal stuff. I even understand people getting, sometimes, I guess they, you know, old ladies, like, if they get some Botox or something like that, you know, remember when Botox was the big controversial thing in the like 20 years ago? Oh, they got Botox in their eyebrows or whatever. I don't even give a shit about that. Look how far past that we've come. That's nothing now, right? Who gives a shit? But, like, the Botox in the lips and all that stuff. I mean, why would you like? I know it's just sounding pretty. I don't know. I'm doing some real critiques on people getting the Botox in their lips. I know that's not a new thing. I guess who cares even about caring about that? But I'm just saying, like, why would you care to look like that? Just be a regular lady. Just be a regular old lady and look pretty. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I mean, look, man, I saw one of my, I'm not gonna say his name here, but I saw one of my oldest friends last weekend. We went out to a party and a bunch of my friends were there. One of my oldest friends was there, and he pulls up and his shocking white hair, you know. And I said, "Damn, dude, you really, you know, you that suits you, man. You look good." You know what I mean? Like, just he's younger than me and he's got shocking white hair and he had these kind of gray blue eyes. I was like, damn, bro, you know, that's not too bad. Now I'm kind of like, damn, I wish my hair would just turn shocking white. Honestly, he looked pretty cool. It reminded me of Tom Coombe in Collateral or something. You know what I mean? That's like, who gives a shit? Who cares? Anyway, enough of that. That's what really grinds my gears. All right, I'm getting off track here. Let's get back on the movie. All right, so what was I saying? So now we have the two characters, and the one is, you know, Dennis Quaid, and it's also interesting because there's another level of this, which is that Margaret Qualley, is that her name? Margaret Qualley, I guess. She was in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which I covered, the book and the movie. And she, her mom is Andie MacDowell. And Andie MacDowell apparently dated Dennis Quaid back in the day, so there's another element to to this, and and also Demi Moore dating or marrying Ashton Kutcher. They were married, you know, they were married for like 7 years. It wasn't just a thing, you know, whatever. I guess they were married for 7 years, but whatever. Anyway, that just adds another element to this sort of TMZ element, I guess. Well, so now the characters, we know that if the 7 days are up or if you miss your dose, you start to physically deteriorate hardcore. And it's kind of 11 level Stranger Things. You know, this is it's clearly like, you can imagine that what's unstated in the movie is like they cooked this, you know, Jose Delgado cooked this up in an MK Ultra lab or something. I don't know. But her nose starts bleeding and she's now 2 different people and she's got to go back and get her injections. But what happens is that, yeah. Yes, why do you wear that silly human suit? Exactly, Banhammer. What happens is that when she goes back to get her injections from Demi Moore, now she's going overboard and she's overstepping the lines, which you know that the devils who made this substance imagined, because they're faceless and they're only a sort of disembodied voice over the phone. Well, now when Demi Moore comes back into the picture and her younger self is locked away in the vault, she sees what's been happening to her and she starts saying, "You bitch," you know, and all this stuff. And the first thing that happens is she gets that old knobbly witch finger. Her finger starts to rot and the knuckles and then start to get all knobbly like that old lady in the Polanski Macbeth, right? Fair is foul and foul is fair, hover through the fog and filthy air, there to meet with Macbeth. And she really starts to deteriorate. Then we see later on that when we have the younger self dancing in her workout videos, which have now been promoted to nighttime, you know, prime time, and she's a major celebrity. She's the newest star, right? Sue is the newest star. Well, she's doing a Eric Prydz Call on Me dance routine. She's doing the splits. She's bending over, and suddenly something pops out of her hip, out of her buttocks, and she says, "Get me my dressing gown." She goes in and she starts to move this knobbly thing from inside of her, and reaches into her tummy tum and pulls it out, and it's a damn chicken bone. So now we know she's just a discarded carcass on the inside, but she's got to get these bones out. And when she goes back home, she sees that Demi Moore, her older self, has been gluttonizing herself with gluten. She's been glutenizing herself, or whatever. She's been eating all sorts of just she's been eating chicken, but she's been eating real food. But then she gets a present in the mail. This is from Dennis Quaid, maybe from Dennis Quaid. It's wrapped up, and it's French cuisine, and she's got tripe and foie gras and all these nasty things. And then we see what's going to get Demi Moore the award if she gets the award, which is that she starts going crazy cooking. And she gets all knobbly and gnarly. Her hair's falling out. It's turning gray. She's turning into a witch. And she starts cooking the hell out of all these meals. She throws eggs on the window. She posts newspapers all over, which is interesting because the window obviously functions as the protagonist is looking to the outside. They're looking over their domain here, but they are also seeing the reflection back in themselves. And just like in Picture of Dorian Gray, she takes the picture of herself, and that is fractured in one eye symbolism. She takes the one eye fractured picture of the actual Demi Moore and puts that into the vault. And now we have the image of herself covered up with newspaper clippings, so we get an older Demi Moore newspaper world clipped onto the panoramic view of the outside, and that is starting to cover up the highway sign, big billboard of the young Sue looking back at herself. So she's not only looking back at herself in the window, but she's also looking back at herself in this billboard. And then she really starts going insane and in eating all this stuff. And then the two characters start to really diverge, and they start hating each other. And they forget that they are one character, but they are starting to resent each other in terms of their jealousy. And we really go through kind of the various stages of 7 deadly sins in this with slaw peg. That's what my 10th grade English British literature teacher, Mr. Wood, taught us about how to remember the 7 deadly sins. Remember that. It's a good mnemonic device. Slaw peg. Sloth, lust, avarice, wrath, pride, envy, gluttony. And she goes through all these versions, and her main thing is going to be, it's not the awards night. It's not the big movie premiere. It's the New Year's Eve ball and the New Year's Eve show. And she's going to be on. That also popped up in the Bob Dylan movie, which is really weird. The Dick Clark thing. That's really weird. Did that pop up in Dick Clark? That was weird. Anyway, so she's gonna be hosting it. She goes on a nighttime show, and she starts cutting down her older self, saying, "Oh, this was just for older people. It wasn't really my generation." So we have a generational divergence. But eventually, what happens is, and this is a long sequence of the movie, the characters literally awake one another. So we have two different sides of the self, both extant simultaneously. And this is heavily symbolic here. It couldn't be more in your face, because she takes her face and smashes Demi Moore's old witch face in the mirror, bloodies it all up, and now she rules. But then the two characters merge into one hideous elephant woman character. And when she finally, I'm skipping over a lot here, but you get the point. When she shows up at the award ceremony at the very end, she actually is wearing, this is pretty crazy. This is Demi Moore wearing a mask of her own face as the other character, wearing a mask of that character as the elephant woman character, with a mask of that as herself on a Xeroxed, colorized, printed picture of her younger self taped onto her face. And she shows up at the award ceremony, and all of a sudden the audience starts They start calling her names and saying, "Oh, she's a monster. She's hideous." They start throwing things at her, and eventually the picture comes off, and she is all of these faces in this big globular toxic Avenger elephant woman with the teeth everywhere and boobs splooging out of her knucklers and her elbows, and she's just this hideous blob. And then eventually her arms rip off and she guar sprays the audience with blood. So now we have full-on Antonin Artaud theater of blood, and the entire audience is sprayed. And now we are, thankfully they don't have like, God, what if they had movie theaters with like, they have like smells now in movie theaters and stuff, which is weird. What if they had like a guar show in the movie theaters? Yeah, so smile, and she sprays the audience with blood, and that's pretty much the substance. So in other words, we go full on hideous thing guar mode, spraying the audience, and this is celebrity, the nature of celebrity, and what they will do for attention. And it's meant to be, they continuously show the word love. It's like they show love in this movie. It's supposed to be love. And it's not love. It's just celebrity adoration. But it's obviously a kind of self-satirical, self-meta-satirical look at celebrity, and I thought it was pretty good because it's like this is the absolute worst possible thing, result of celebrities and transhumanism, but it ends up being yes, Jethro, it ends in her Hollywood star, and so she's a star, and then we see the star is washed over with the street cleaners, and it's still cracked, and we're going to eventually forget. And so that's it. That's the substance. I don't think that it's not really up to me to recommend a movie or not. I mean, you guys, you're all adults. You can decide for yourselves. But I would say, I know a lot of people like body horror stuff. They like David Cronenberg and stuff like that. But that's not really my bag, but I did appreciate the movie. It's not whether I liked the movie or not. I didn't really necessarily like it. I don't like movies like this, but I thought it was well done and pretty clever. Pretty clever in terms of its its shallow depth, for an oxymoronic phrase that I used in the channel description there. So that's about it for the substance. Hey, let's move on to something else here. And if you want to support the show, please think about doing that. You can Please like the stream. Please share. Please get me out there. Get me some other people that I can be on with, that I can have on here. I love talking to the people. And also, you can support me at the links below in the channel description. If you're watching this later, they're in the stream description. They're also in the channel description. And so, I want to give you a couple of other things to move on to here, just to talk about in a sort of ancillary fashion, but also as sort of provenance for this. One would be, and I'm going to do a full stream on this later, which is Don Delillo's Underworld. But one thing that's interesting here is what he says about, he goes into everything here. He talks about L.A., and this is mainly on the idea of waste. The book is so far centered on the aspect of industrialized waste and how that provides this sort of strange alternate other for the world that we live in, especially moving into a kind of postmodern landscape. And one thing that he talks about here is, he gives these long, not diatribes, but there's the book focuses on pretty much everything. And one of these is L.A. One thing that he says on page 338 is, he says, pain is just another form of information. Let's see. This is, L.A. He says, smogged out. L.A. is, this is what he says. This is L.A. This is crazy that I just read this and this is happening now. We ran through smogged out hollows past houses stilted over raw defiles and ran into wooded areas that had the look of tinder, a dry, white, dusty stillness, a sense of combustible edge. But maybe not. I might have been devising my own newsreel. That, I think, is very providential in terms of even the movie, The Substance, because The Substance, again, is L.A., and we have this sort of fire, the fire of celebrity. We have the fire of the landscape, an environmental fire, and we also have the fiery passions of these people trying to live forever. But it also, it's just wild that sort of pops up in the tindered edge of the landscape. Like when he's talking about waste, he says, I thought terrible substances were dumped routinely in LDCs. An LDC, I just found out, was a less developed country in the language of banks and other global entities. Those little, he says, it's a nasty business that's getting bigger all the time. A country will take a fee amounting to 4 times its gross national product to accept a shipment of toxic waste. What happens after that, we don't know. They think that this toxic waste on these barges, they don't know what it is, and the drums of toxic waste. These guys are waste specialists, especially plutonium and any kind of nuclear waste. And what's interesting is that part of our gross national product is, of course, waste, and then we have waste exportation. We also have the exporting of celebrity. And one fact I read about The Substance is that this was the first movie that they've screened in Vietnam like this in years, and that they only cut like a few minutes of the film. Movies that are shown, especially in parts of Asia and Southeast Asia. Like I lived in Malaysia for a summer, and one of the things that, I remember seeing Batman Begins in Malaysia, and they cut the kissing scene. And because they can't show that, and they also, you can't, of course, in public, you can't, in Thailand and Malaysia, you can't, it's a big faux pas to drop money on the ground or to do anything to deface the money because it has the image of the king on there, the king of Malaysia, or the king of Thailand. So, but the movie is a kind of waste, and The Substance is about wasting away and importing and exporting waste. She's exporting the waste of herself outwards, but then importing this wasted individual back into her very skin. But they don't know in the movie in the book Underworld here, whether it is industrial waste or even CIA heroin. He says, one, it's a heroin shipment, which makes no sense. 2, it's incinerator ash from the New York area, industrial grade mainly, 20 million pounds, arsenic, copper, lead, mercury, dioxins, Sims said agreeably, biting into the middle of his mesquite grilled beef. They don't know. And what I thought was wild about that was there's another LA connection there, because remember in Point Break, we covered Point Break, the scene where Pappas finds the scuff mark on the countertop in the bank from the ex-presidents, and he says, all these bank robberies, and we get one scuff mark. So he does a scientific analysis of the scuff mark, and he finds that the scuff mark has elements, and I think this is verbatim, elements of arsenic, copper, lead, and mercury. And remember that he says this is, among other things, used in carnauba wax, in Mr. Zog's sex wax, and that's when he comes up with the theory that these are surfers. They are surfers. The ex-presidents are surfers. Isn't that wild? So that's another LA connection there. Also, there's a great paragraph here on really lines of intersection cutting through history and logic and expectation. This is on U-238 and the disposal of waste. He says, I watched men in, and this also pops up again in a synchronistic fashion in terms of postmodern landscape with what we've just talked about recently in terms of drones and the New Jersey thing, which is missing waste or missing irradiated material. He says, I watched men in moon suits bury drums of nuclear waste, and I thought of the living rocks down there, the subterranean process, the half-life, the atoms that decay to half the original number. The most common isotope of uranium is bombarded with neutrons to produce plutonium that fissions if we can generate a verb from the energy of splitting atoms. The isotope has the half mass has the mass number 238. Add the digits and you get 13. But the bombs were not released. I remember Clara Sachs talking about the men who flew the strategic bombers as we all stood listening in the long, low structure of sectioned concrete. The missiles remained in the rotary launchers. The men came back and the cities were not destroyed. It's also one more. He talks about JFK here and Libra. We covered the book Libra. And there is, on page 59 here, he talks about, this is postmodern history. Russ thinks this is another kind of history. He thinks they will carry something out of here that joins them all in a rare way that binds them to a memory with protective power. People are climbing lampposts on Amsterdam Avenue, tooting car horns in Little Italy. Isn't it possible that this mid-century moment enters the skin more lastingly than the vast shaping strategies of eminent leaders, generals steely in their sunglasses, the map visions that pierce our dreams? Russ wants to believe a thing like this keeps us safe in some undetermined way. This is the thing that will pulse in this brain come old age and double vision and dizzy spells. The surge sensation, the leap of people already standing, that bolt of noise and joy when the ball went in. This is the people's history, and it has flesh and breath that quicken to the force of this old safe game of ours. He says, all the fragments of the afternoon collect around his airborne form. It's all falling indelibly into the past. What's great about this book is there's a section, and this is kind of a tangent here, but there's the book starts off as they're at a baseball game, and this is where J. Edgar Hoover is at the baseball game, and all of a sudden the wind blows, and a fragment of trash, a piece of a newspaper, a piece of Time magazine, goes right onto his face, and he pulls it out, and it is Bruegel's Death Rides a Shadow, and J. Edgar Hoover takes it home and sees something in himself in the picture. So anyway, it's an interesting book, and I think that sort of plays a sort of providential role in this. Also, we have Imperial Bedrooms. This is Bret Easton Ellis's sequel to Less Than Zero, and all I'll say about this book is, aside from the vast abandoned world laid out in anonymous grids and quadrants. That's a postmodern alienation. The icy air so cold it shimmers. And, of course, there's a great section here. I wrote entire paragraph illuminating illuminating the carry-ons in blackest sky, shimmering sea curving toward us. Basically, this book is about how the movie, all of Bret Easton Ellis's books comment on themselves, and they all exist in one world. And so Lunar Park is a kind of author living. We have Bret Easton Ellis writing the book as the author who becomes the speaker in the book and writes about how the movie American Psycho and the publication of the book haunt him. They literally haunt him because there's a guy following him who is Patrick Bateman that he sees. And Lunar Park is his best book. But in this, we have Less Than Zero. And what he talks about in Less Than Zero, it's like 1986. 1986. Less Than Zero, which had the film version with Robert Downey Jr. And James Spader. Basically is that he says that the movie made him out to be one of the characters in the film as the author. But this is the speaker in the book who is separate from the author, who's separate from Bret Easton Ellis. So we have levels of personae within his literary works. And he says that basically the movie ended up showing this kind of Brat Pack version of the 80s with the kind of moralistic lesson where the Bret Easton Ellis character is seen as the moral compass. But he is not, he's not the moral compass, and these people that were the book was based on, the book within the book, continued living. So he says Julian goes on and ends up being a heroin addict. The Bret Easton Ellis functioned character goes off to New York and lives, and then comes back to LA to write a screenplay and to make a movie of one of his works. But he starts reconnecting with his old cast of characters, his old friends that were the characters in Less Than Zero. And eventually characters start getting murdered, serial killer style. It gets really vicious in Bret Easton Ellis style, kind of hyper ultra violence. But we figure out, just like in the Shards, my interpretation is that the speaker is dissociated from himself, and he is the killer. He is the killer because he's separated from himself in so many different levels and layers. So what you end up doing, what he ends up showing you here, is that we have a skin deep notion of society, and especially of wealth and high society and celebrity culture, where the persona of the character in the book or the movie gets layered on to the author, and the author is not that character. There's a huge dissociation between is that Ivana Trump? Jeez, Patrick. I mean Marcus. What would Ivana Trump be doing at Texarkana in the middle of the afternoon? Why are they all so separate? Well, it shows that no matter how far deep you go into character stories, it all ends up shallow, and all of the details end up being these sort of petty details in a sort of hyper capitalistic end of society. He says the house is surrounded, the palm trees in the house function as a kind of guard quadrants and rails around a compound. The other book that I was going to talk about here is the fairy tales, and this is interesting because the fairy tales and folk tales, the reason this plays into the movie The Substance is because one thing that I realized about the fairy tales and the folk tales, and don't forget to like, you guys. Please like, please share, please like. Please support me any way you can. Drop some super chats if you want. Grab some memberships. One of the things I noticed about the fairy tales and the folk tales is that the difference between fairy tales, I know this is probably obvious to most, but the difference between fairy tales and folk tales is that the folk tale is updated for adults, and the fairy tale, while meant to be for children, actually functions as not only sort of self-obvious cautionary tales with morals and a kind of updated Aesop's fables, but they are a lot of times a lot more gruesome than the folk tales can be. And what the introduction states here is that for one, he talks about magical, the introduction talks about magical objects, and he says, caution is required in symbolic analysis. It is not enough, as is sometimes assumed, to equate symbol to reality in a one-to-one relationship and leave it at that. Things are usually more complicated, and that's especially true when talking about some of these characters in the fairy tales. And the substance is another sort of what you think would be a skewed fairy tale gone wrong, but it is actually just a fairy tale. And the reason for that is that one of the things that happens in the classic fairy tales is that we have an opposing effect with inverted things and values, and these are supposed to mimic a kind of convergence between folk paganism and Christian morals. And that's because the last shall be first, the first shall be last. We have characters who, for instance, in the short story it's called Hop on My Thumb, we have a character who is the seventh son, and all of the other brothers are very small, but he's the smallest. He is discarded, but of course he makes up for that with his intelligence and his guile and his wit. We have in Griselda, which is really probably the best one of these. Griselda is about a character she's a shepherdess. She's innocent. She's like the lamb. She is stainless. And she's just a child, and then she grows up in this, on her farm. And then eventually the prince comes along, and the prince is supposed to be her kind of equal and opposite. And he sees her, and there's also the symbolism, which again, we can't really go to. It's already there on the surface, which is that he's a hunter. He's hunting, and then he finds his prey. So the question is whether she's going to be prey or whether she's going to be somebody that he is hunting for as a groom. A future groom is hunting for a bride. So he finds this girl, and then he invites her to a wedding, and ends up that the wedding is arranged for her because they're going to get married. They get married, and then this darker aspect of his personality takes over, and he starts pushing her because he wants to find a way where she's guilty, or she's crossed him, or she's unfaithful. But every time he tries to push her to more, he finds that she continuously relies on her Christian faith. And so she prays for her husband, she prays that he will have peace of mind, and eventually they have a child. The child is taken away, and then he comes to her, and the child is taken to a convent to be raised. And he comes, and she's sad and weeping, but she's steadfast in her faith, and she says that that she won't be abandoned, and this is all for the best because she obeys her husband in the story. And then eventually the husband tells her that their daughter has died. Well, then years later, and then he divorces. He's going to leave her because now their child is gone. Well, he shows up years later, and he says he's found a new bride, and he presents this bride, but the bride is their daughter, but it's not for him to marry. It's actually for him to marry off to another prince. And then what happens is that ends up proving his wife's faithfulness. It's a pretty weird story. He proves his wife's faithfulness, that she's stuck with him in all this time, and they end up living happily ever after. Bluebeard is a straight up serial killer story, a psychotic serial killer story, where a young bride is again married off to this character Bluebeard, who's an ogre. What I also learned from this is that I'd forgotten that ogres, and this really did come about when I was reading about the Long Island serial killer who was described as an ogre when he came down to Virginia. He was allegedly, it was him, chasing some woman at a lake, and he was described as an ogre, and the artist version looks exactly like him. Well, an ogre is an ogre because an ogre is a child chiller. That's what an ogre is. It's not just a big, scary creature. It's also specifically that element. So then what happens? Yeah, and Bluebeard is also, yes, J.C. Miller. Bluebeard is also Gilles de Rais. It comes up in the Sons of Cain book. But Bluebeard tells his wife that he's going to go away on business, and that she has all these. There are all these fairy tales always have magical talismans. That sometimes they have fairies or whatever, but this has a specific magical talisman, which is the key. And he tells her you can have the key to anywhere in the house, but you can't go in this one room. And so we're obviously supposed to take a kind of Genesis biblical provenance from this, but it's inverted, because what ends up happening is she doesn't want to go in the room, but she has friends over, and the friends kind of want her to go in the room. She makes a back way into the room. She ends up opening the lock, putting the key into the lock, opening it, and she sees these women, like his former wives, on meat hooks in the room, and the floor is covered and crusted in blood. And she immediately tries to back out of the room. This is knowledge she shouldn't have. And she tries to lock it, but the key is stained with blood. So now, like Lady Macbeth, she's trying to wash away the blood stain, and her husband gets back and tells her, I told you not to do this. Now I've got to slaughter you. So it's almost like the serpent giving a rule, right? And he is the serpent here, and this is the knowledge of death, but it's him, and he wants to kill her. And then they look out the window, there's a dust cloud, and eventually it's her brothers, and her family comes. Sort of a dust cloud through the window of the castle looks like a mighty wind, looks like God's wind is being brought to the castle, and the brothers show up, they slaughter Bluebeard, and then she lives happily ever after. It's pretty crazy. Sleeping Beauty of the Wood is also, was used for the Disney book, Disney movie, and that's also where we have a series of seven fairies. Meanwhile, the fairies, this is page 84 of this book. Meanwhile, the fairies began to present their gifts to the princess. The gift that the youngest fairy gave was that she would be the loveliest person in the world. The next one's gift was that she would be as clever as an angel. The third gift was that she would do everything with all the grace imaginable. The fourth, that she would dance to perfection. The fifth, that she would sing like a nightingale. and the sixth that she would play beautiful music on all kinds of instruments. When it came to the turn of the very old fairy who shows up out of nowhere, the Wicked Witch, whose head was shaking, but not so much from age as from bad temper, she said that the princess would prick her hand on the point of a spindle on a spinning wheel and that she would die. So then there's a seventh fairy who has stayed back because she knew that the Wicked Witch was going to give her some sort of negative power or doom her, and she says that she's going to prick her finger and all that's going to happen, but when it happens, she can be awakened by the kiss of her prince. So when she does that, everyone in the castle falls asleep, and then they're going to be awakened when the prince comes, and then she's going to live happily ever after. Little Red Riding Hood is also a straight up lycanthropic serial killer story. But what's interesting about this is that, like with the Ted Hughes poem, November, right? So much mere Alsatian, the last wolf killed in Britain. There were wolves all over Europe, but then there were instances of werewolves everywhere, and these were demonic, dissociated proto-serial killers roaming all over medieval Europe. That's described in Sons of Cain. And eventually, one of them dresses up like the grandmother, has a Little Red Riding Hood over, and makes her way into the bed and then eats her. So we have cannibalism is huge in the fairy tale stories. So that it's just interesting. I think it's always valuable to go back and look at things like this, because we have a notion that the fairy tales are not quite as we remember them and that they were a lot darker. But I think it's interesting to go back, especially to Charles Perrault, who wrote these fairy tales. They were already folk and fairy tales, but he sort of anthologized them in the, the 1700s and in the 1700s, and made them into the written fairy tales that we have now. But it's interesting to go back and look at those, especially as adults, because we see that the lessons, the lessons really, and the interpretations that we get from these fairy tales are absolutely valid and extant for us, especially as adults, because they describe situations and people that still exist. So in the beginning, in the preface to the book, when it talks about being careful with analysis, I think that what's really wild here is that the analysis of the symbolism in the fairy tales already exists on the surface, but it's not just one-to-one, and we have sort of as William Carlos Williams says, a multifoliate symbolism. So that's the fairy tales. Let's see, we've been going about an hour and 20 minutes here. Do you guys want me to talk about the Bob Dylan movie? Just as a little bonus here. Let's see. Let me also look up and see if we've got any support here while I'm going here. Thanks, everybody, for being here on a Saturday night. This is Saturday Night at the Movies, Saturday Night Cinema, and with a little literary analysis thrown into it. So I figured I would talk about the Bob Dylan movie, which is called A Complete Unknown, because my friend Joseph Arthur put me onto this. Let me give a shout out, first of all, to Jacob. Thank you so much for that $25 super chat on PayPal. Really appreciate you. Thank you so much. That is very helpful. That really means a lot. Thank you so much, buddy. Thank you, of course, to Jason for that $8 PayPal. Thank you, Jason. Really appreciate you. And also, one came in earlier in the week, and this was right on time. Thank goodness. Thank you to Ethan. Thank you so much, Ethan, for that $20 Cash App that you sent. He said, appreciate you, boss. I appreciate you, boss. Really appreciate that. Thank you so much. Thank you for that support. If you want to grab a super chat, you can do so right down there. Super chats are live. You can also hit me up on the links provided that Jason has been dropping, and you can drop there on PayPal, Cash App, Venmo, whatever, and that really helps me out. And let's see. It's good to get a couple of decent movies here at the end of the 2024 season into 2025. So that's I like that. And so let's go. Let's talk about the Bob Dylan movie. So Jacob, my friend Joseph Arthur put me onto this, and shouts out to Joseph Arthur out there. And his latest album that came out. Also, you can check him out anywhere. He Joseph Arthur was really great. Had me on when TNT was still going. So thank you to Joseph Arthur also for putting me onto this movie. And this is called Complete Unknown. This is a surprising movie that it was made in the first place because there have been a bunch of Bob Dylan movies. Remember I'm Not There with Cate Blanchett, Christian Bale, had a bunch of people in it. Now that movie I actually did not like that movie. And I thought it was too insistent. It insisted upon itself a little too much. Also, I get the artistic interpretation of trying to cast Cate Blanchett as Bob Dylan because you get the kind of willowy, wispy, young Dylan character and a kind of artistic sentiment with that. But it's a little annoying. That doesn't work. Cate Blanchett also is. I don't know. I've had it with Cate Blanchett. This one is more straight early Dylan, and I covered Bob Dylan with Joseph Arthur way back in the day. You can see that if you look back in the archives of the stream here. It's right here. So this is Timothée Chalamet as Bob Dylan. And I got to say, again, it was surprising to see this. I don't know why it was made all of a sudden, but I like that. First of all, I do like that Timothée Chalamet, who I like as an actor now. I did not like him before, and then when I saw Dune 2, I liked that movie. I, of course, liked Dune 2, but also that Hot Summer Nights. He was also in the Cannibal movie. He's making pretty decent what they call choices as an actor. And what I really like in this is that there's really no reason for him to do a movie like this. And I was worried that it was going to be straight up just his impression, an impression of Bob Dylan. And I talked about that recently. I talked about that a bunch with actors and how, especially on the member stream, I talked about the Trump movie, The Apprentice, and I think that was a surprising movie. It was surprisingly well done, at least for the first half. This one is interesting because Timothée Chalamet, first of all, it was obvious to me that he sings all the songs in the movie. I have a pretty good ear for that. I think you guys do too. And so, but he did just like Val Kilmer did in The Doors. And there's a kind of mixing between Bob Dylan and between Timothée Chalamet's voice. But the thing is that it's not a hard thing to do if you're going to do an impression of Bob Dylan. I mean, it's like, hey, I'm sexy, but I'm also a weasel. Apparently in the movie is what they make him out to be. I'm really dark, and I'm kind of nodding like I'm on heroin, but it's too early for that because it's the '60s, and I didn't like that the drama in the movie was contrived. In a sense, the main plot of the movie is that Dylan is rising and going from a folk singer into a cultural phenomenon of the 60s. And the flashpoint for that is obviously the Newport Folk Festival with Pete Seeger, played by Edward Norton. Edward Norton was actually really good in this. I told you that I saw Dylan in concert in like 2017, and it was exactly like the Norm Macdonald bit. He came out on stage, and it was like the stage design was like rusted fire. And he came out on stage, and he was like wearing a bolo, and he was like, and he was singing, and then he said, "All right, it's time to take requests." And somebody yelled, "Tangled Up in Blue," and he goes, "I just played that one." Because all of his songs were rearranged. They were all rearranged as this kind of country western thing, which kind of pissed me off. I mean, that would. But the Newport Folk Festival, is the point where we have in the movie the transition from folk music post-Korean War, early 60s, into what's going to become the 60s. And like a Rolling Stone, and we have Dylan Goes Electric and all that stuff. And culturally, in terms of especially cultural history, that's really important because Dylan, Dylan, Elvis, and the Beatles are really the three main pop icons of what made American rock and roll cultural music. It's a huge movement. And aside from Tavistock and all the stuff in cultural creation, just looking at that, those are the three sort of pillars. And of course, the stories about Dylan and introducing the Beatles to all the stuff, all that. But the problem is that in the movie, even I, who am highly aware of all that stuff and rock and roll history and all that, I get to a point watching the movie where I go, I don't care about the drama in this. Like, he's going on to the Newport Folk Festival and he's going to play electric. Yeah, I'm Bob Dylan and I'm haggard as hell. I'm almost as haggard as George Harrison. And, he goes on stage and they're like, is he going to play electric? Is he going to play electric? You need to run your song list past us. And he goes on and he starts playing music and he's like playing Maggie's Farm and everybody's like, you suck. Shut up. Get off the stage, you little weasel. But also the problem is, the problem is that the dichotomy in the movie, the cultural shift that takes place is between the old guard and the new guard. And the old guard is made out to be like a conservative old guard who wants American folk music because the song stands for itself. And Bob Dylan's hero is Woody Guthrie, and he's in the film, and Pete Seeger helps him along, and you got all these this cast of characters. And then Dylan starts to resent his fame at the songs that he's written. So, like, he goes on. Have you guys seen the Penny Baker documentary, the famous one, Don't Look Back? Have you guys seen that one? Dylan's arch enemy is Donovan. Right, Donovan and the hurdy-gurdy man. Donovan's daughter was Ione Skye, who was with Anthony Kiedis for a long time. She didn't say anything. Donovan is like the anti-Bob Dylan, like two different sides. And he goes off to play at Royal Albert Hall, and he's playing his songs, but he resents the fact that he's with Joan Baez and writing her songs, and she resents that he's bigger than she is. And you get this thing in movies, again, where if this happens in real life, I can't understand this. Like, when you get someone, if you're in a let's say you're in a relationship. Let's say, ladies, you're in a relationship with a dude, and the dude is clearly a genius, right? He's Mozart. He's the genius of all time. We covered Amadeus, and with David Patrick Harry. Shouts out to David Patrick Harry, Church of the Eternal Logos. So Stanzi is with Wolfie. I love Stanzi, by the way. She's like the ultimate. She's awesome. Stanzi is with Wolfie, and she's like, you need to get some sleep. You're gonna die and all this stuff. It's like, clearly he's burning the candle at both ends, and he's the genius of all time, and he's gonna flame out, but he's gonna live forever in terms of his art. But in this, we get Joan Baez and these various people who are, with Bob Dylan, and it's like, they keep doing this thing where they're like, why are you up at night? Why are you writing songs? And he's like, I'm just trying to write some songs. And they're like, well, you need to come to bed. It's like, come to bed? Why? Let him write the fucking songs. He's a songwriter. It's like, if you're married to an actor and the actor has to go and film scenes and he's got to be up for a 4 a.m. call and he's got to get up in the middle of the night, you know that. You know that he's got to go do that. If you're with someone and they have an occupation, and they're doing their thing, don't get mad at them about doing the occupation. Now, I get it. If you have a family and you have kids, which they don't in the movie, then, your husband doesn't need to be working overtime afterwards, right, every single damn day and not, and skipping the kids' baseball games. I get that. But this is different. This is like they're young and they're not even married and they're just boyfriend, girlfriend, and they don't like that he's up writing songs. Get over it. What the hell? The guy's trying to write Mr. Tam. You know what they should have said? They should have said, shut the hell up with the tambourine. Right? By the way, bad idea to put the damn kazoo sound in Subterranean Homesick Blues or whatever. Whee! Oh my gosh, that's so bad. That's the one bad part of that. But listen, man. Oh, everybody must get stoned. Okay. Shut the fuck up and come back to bed. I get it. But that's, look, I also prefer Dylan in the 70s. I like Hurricane and Blood on the Tracks. I like, I like Tangled Up in Blue, and I like that era. But listen, man, I'm not denigrating Dylan here so much as I'm saying that the drama of the movie didn't really make sense with that. Like when they're going on stage and he's about to cut the lines, and he's like, turn down the volume. It's too loud. What the fuck are you talking about? You're at a concert. You got all these lame people here at the folk festival anyway. They're not doing shit. Right? I mean, Johnny Cash is here. Like, you want to turn down the music? What are you talking about? So that was a little contrived. There was a funny scene where they are watching the news and the Khrushchev JFK event is happening and the Cuban Missile Crisis. And it's funny because all of the people like are trying to get out of New York and they're all like taking taxis out of New York. They're like, get me out of here. And then they wake up the next day and it's all fine. And Bob Dylan's like, guess we're on to the next thing. I guess you're still alive, right? Well, it's like you want to go back in time and say to them, like, it's going to get much worse. You thought that was bad. Wait till you have roving bands of, what, all just name the thing. So again, we have this like divergence between the old guard and the new guard. And the old guard is the Pete Seeger types, and they're the folk traditionalists, and the new guard are the Bob Dylan, SJ people. But the problem is that there's no conservative group in the thing. It's just they all are just tearing themselves apart in the thing. And what I did like about the movie is that Dylan is kind of above all that. He doesn't really give a shit. He just wants to make music. He wants to sit down, he wants to play with whoever, and he wants to write songs. He sees, like, he goes to McSorley's in the East Village, and he sees this Irish band playing, and he likes it. He sees like an Albert King guy playing some blues guitar from the Mississippi Delta, and he likes it. He wants to incorporate that. He likes watching Johnny Cash. He wants to incorporate it, and it's fun to play. So he's like, hey, I'm just going to play this music. Who gives a shit? But everybody around him is kind of too do-gooder with the societal political claims that they have on the music, and so they just get to be annoying. Now it was a good film. It was that makes it sound like it was a bad film. It was a good film, and I do like Timothée Chalamet, and it was very good. And I think it's important, we can kind of laugh and scoff at music from prior eras and stuff, but those things are important, and they're also good. They are good. That doesn't mean that you have to like them, that you have to sit there and listen to Tangled Up in Blue all the time. But I think one thing that's going away is the appreciation of good versus bad, and we can have critiques of good things within that realm, and we can say what we think is important about them or not, and you kind of have to leave your good or bad mind out of it. At times. Now, you don't have to. We like what we like when it comes to music. I like how in the Bret Easton Ellis book, he talks about Bad for Lashes and What's a Girl to Do. He says he was listening to that. I like that song. I like Bad for Lashes. I like electronic music. I like Eric Prydz. But I like Oasis. I like Smashing Pumpkins. I like 70s era Bob Dylan. I like, whatever. It's important to understand what makes something good and what makes something just famous. And so I think that what's the matter, what's the matter, Dylan? See how I got you pushing too many pencils? Yeah, I mean, one thing that's annoying in the movie is like when the guys find out, they're like, Dylan isn't even his real name. And it's like, we want authentic people here at the folk festival. Well, don't you want an audience? Don't you want people here? I mean, don't you want people to have a good time if they're at who wants to go to a music festival and sit there and go, very good. You want to have a good time. And who gives a shit if it's not his real name? It's a stage name. Have they ever heard of showbiz? Like, nobody in show business has the real name. My friend Richie goes by Richie Corgan because he got it from Billy Corgan, and that's because his real last name was already taken in equity, in the actor's equity. Somebody already had his last name, so he goes by Richard Corgan. That isn't, it's fine. Who gives a shit? Also, I do like that he got it from Dylan Thomas, whom we've covered, right? The force that through the green fuse drives the flower. We just talked about Dylan Thomas recently. They also have on-location shots. They go to the Chelsea Hotel. I hung out at the Chelsea Hotel when I lived in New York. They're at Tompkins Square Park. They're at all these places. I thought that was really well done, and it's good. It also is weird that Elle Fanning shows up in the movie when she was just in the Neon Demon that we saw. But even the scene where he picks up Elle Fanning and they go on the motorcycle and they drive from the West Village off to Newport Folk Festival on the motorcycle, and then like she sees him singing with Joan Baez, and she's crying, and then she goes off to take the ferry back, and she's gonna leave him, and she said, "This is not part of my life." All right, that's fine. You're not meant to be together. That's fine. But like, why are you resenting the fact that he's just singing on stage with this other folk singer? Who gives a shit? Also, Joan Baez, super annoying. I mean, look, man, I've seen the Rolling Thunder review. I've seen the band. I love the band. I love the band. And, Scorsese did The Last Waltz, and I like Bob Dylan's Basement Tapes. I like Quinn the Eskimo and all that. But Joan Baez always annoys me. Like, she's trying to harmonize with Bob Dylan. She's like, oh, no. And you're like, shut up. Let him sing the song. The actress in the movie was actually a lot better than Joan Baez. I think. I mean, she was very pretty. The actress was very pretty. She walked around with no shoes on the whole damn time. Oh, you want to be one with the earth. I get it and all that. But you got too much hair. She sings in a style where Joan Baez to me always sang in a style. This kind of, what's that other one? Joni Mitchell and Joan Baez always sang in this style where it was like they first learned how to sing, but they didn't develop their own singing voice. You know, when people sing, they have their own weird voice. Like, Dylan has an obvious voice. Like, Johnny's in the basement, man. He has his own voice, and it's very unique. Right? Jim Morrison has it's clearly Jim Morrison, and Jim Morrison's singing a kind of blues, a kind of LA woman blues, right? Lost in a Roman wilderness of pain, right? Ophelia leaves sodden in silk chlorine dream. Mad stifled witness, the angel man finally claimed this benevolent soul. Well, right, every poem has wolves in them, Pam. Every poem but one. Well, Joan Baez and I always thought Sandy Denny was the better version of Joan Baez and what's her name? Pinhead Gunpowder actually did a better a cover of the Parking Lot song than Joan Baez. I always liked that version better. The 90s, pop punk band. But I like Sandy Denny because she's the one who sings on Battle of Evermore with Led Zeppelin. I always thought that's better. I always thought that was better than anything Joan Baez ever did. But anyway, the girl who plays Joan Baez is really good, and it shows Dylan's, rise to fame and how he's sort of used as this in the early 60s. Because another thing that I realized watching the film is that there's a kind of forgotten generation in the middle of the greatest generation and then the boomers, and that is the Korean War generation. And that's sort of where, to me, the Pete Seeger and the Bob Dylan people kind of really come. I mean, Bob Dylan is it's one of the baby boomers, but there's this other sort of generation, and that's sort of where the dichotomy between the two come in. I love it when Van Morrison comes in The Last Waltz. He's great. Singing Caravan. Van Morrison is great. He's got that song about Sandy Row that I like. Crispy will like that. But yeah, I liked the band, The Weight, and they talk about they include the word The Weight in a bunch of the dialogue, and then they don't introduce Levon Helm. He's not a character in the movie that I saw. So that was a little weird. But The Weight and The Night They Drove All Dixie Down, are in the Last Waltz. That's worth watching. I talked recently. I talked to somebody this weekend about how the people don't know this. I've said this before, but the idea. Remember when in the Rolling Thunder review when Bob Dylan painted his face white like a Japanese theatrical character? Do you know where that comes from? That comes from apparently Young Sharon Stone went backstage with her mom to a Bob Dylan concert, and they met Bob Dylan, and she was wearing a Kiss shirt. And he said, "Who's that Kiss?" And she was like, "Oh, it's this band." And he was like, "I don't know what they do, but I like the makeup." So that's where he got it from. That's why he painted his face white. By the way, Kiss sucks. I hate Kiss. If you like Kiss, fine, but no, absolutely not. Yeah, that was Dylan in Rolling Thunder Review. Yeah, absolutely no Kiss here. No, none of that. Get that right out of here. But if you like them, then that's your thing. That's cool. That's fine. So anyway, the Complete Unknown is it's also a kind of it's an interesting title. It's you forget the title of the movie when you're going to go to the movie. Because it has Complete Unknown, like I don't know the name. Yeah, Fun Punk Kiss sucks. Yes, absolutely. Especially Gene Simmons. Yeah, get him right out of here. You gotta go, bro, dude. Yeah, they're just awful. Like platform shoes with spikes, and they're not Guar. Sorry, bud. T-Rex is better than Kiss, says Fun Punk. Yeah, Mark Boland. Yeah, so this they really got the look right, and they went beyond. I will say that they went beyond the kind of impression of Bob Dylan that would be so easy to do in a film, and they made the characters three-dimensional. And Timothée Chalamet was great. I mean, I forgot I was watching him, and that's saying something, especially from me. But watching a movie with a major star playing a real life character, it's sort of dangerous territory. It can become just a parody, and it wasn't a parody. It was done really well. They do make him out to be a little bit almost like he's a slow boy at times, which is weird. That would be the kind of modern interpretation of a character like this, but he was an artistic character. But we go through the various stages of Bob Dylan up past the Newport Folk Festival, and then that's the movie. And they even end with an end card on how he won the Nobel Prize for Literature, which I have my own thoughts about that. I've discussed that before, and didn't go to the ceremony, of course. Bob Dylan's also been in movies. He was an actor. Bob Dylan played Ned Kelly. And did he play Ned Kelly? I think he was he going to play Ned Kelly, or was that Mick Jagger? Let's see. Was Bob Dylan Ned Kelly? He was also in some 80s movie that I always forget. Lenny will do merely any task. Ask for compensation, and there's a little he will ask. Right, I like that. Let me see. No, not Bib Dylan. Bob Dylan. Bob Dylan. So hard to pull him up. Let's see. Movies. Actor. He was in... Oh, Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid. That's what he was in. Yeah, Mick Jagger played Ned Kelly. Wonder Boys. He was in Wonder Boys. Remember that movie? I saw that when I was in Belfast. That's actor Michael Douglas with Robert Downey Jr. in the midst of his troubles. He's playing an English professor. Masked and Anonymous, 2003. What's the movie he was in the 80s where he played an actor? Where he was an actor. Okay, well, that's not going to work. I can't pull that up. Anyway, so that's it. That's Complete Unknown. I would recommend seeing that. I think it's a decent movie, and it's pretty fairly wholesome, and it's not gratuitous or whatever, if that's your bag, seeing that versus The Substance, which is extremely gratuitous, very gratuitous. So and that it's all naked parts and inner juices and blooge and splotch everywhere in the movie. So that's that. So anyway, let's see if we got any support here on Super Chats. I don't see any Super Chats coming in, but we did get some Super Chats through the main ones that are really helped me the most. So thank you for that. That really helps me out a lot. You guys, please make sure you, if you would, please, I ask you, please to like and share. Also, before I forget, there is, let's see, our friends Mella and Real John Connor, I think, have a stream coming up tomorrow night, or they have a video premiere coming up tomorrow night. And I assume it's on Mella's channel. So go over to Mella Forta, who's there in the chat. Make sure you check that out tomorrow night. We want to support our friends. Hope everybody's doing well in the snowstorm. Next weekend, big weekend. Of course, it's the big political weekend, but it's also, I have to give a shout out because my boy Trey Henderson won the Cotton Bowl last night, scored 75-yard return touchdown, so that was really good. 75-yard run. And he's one of the captains of the team, Ohio State, so they're playing in the national championship next weekend. You know, I'm not a big sports ball, but I do want to support the people that I know. We've got to support the people that we know and our loved ones when they're doing great things, and it's great to watch the people who are the best at what they do what they do. And he is certainly the best running back in the country. So good for him. Also, shouts out to everybody out there. Hope you guys are well, staying well in this January. If you're out there on the West Coast, man, I pray for you. Hope you're doing well. If you're here on the Beast Coast with the snow, hope you're enjoying the snow. Yep, Real John Connor and Mella tomorrow night. You guys, if you want to leave a comment afterwards, I would really appreciate it. That helps me out a lot. Yes. Yeah, you got to keep reading these books and watching these movies. I'm going to be reading Underworld, and also I've got a bunch of other books coming up. Of course, the Sidney Gottlieb Poisoner in Chief. I've got a Charlemagne book in there that I need to read, the two lives of Charlemagne, and that does it for Bret Easton Ellis. We've done all the Bret Easton Ellis. Rules of Attraction was the other book, which I didn't cover. Rules of Attraction actually did not cover Rules of Attraction on the stream of its own, but I've talked about it in relation to other streams, and of course the movie. The movie was directed by, I think, Roger Avery, who was just on Quentin Tarantino a while back. I talked about that when it came out. And Rules of Attraction is an interesting book. It's written in his books all have a completely different type of style in terms of not only in terms of their diction and vernacular, but in terms of their writing style, and I really appreciate his writing. So thank you, everybody, for being here. I'm going to leave you with Sting and to cut off his new album. If you want to support me at any time, please think about hitting the links which have been dropped below here and which are in the channel description, in the video description. Think about getting a membership. I will be doing more members-only streams. I just did the Apprentice Donaldo Trump movie, and let's see, yeah, I think that will do it. I will be there for Mella and John Connor tomorrow night, watching their video. Shouts out to Maddie Rokuta Brown out there, and everybody else. Thank you for being here. Make sure to leave a comment afterwards. Just drop the word algo. Say movie. What do you think of the movie? Did you see The Substance? Was it good? Was it bad? What do you think? Leave a comment. Helps me out. And that's about it, you guys. I love y'all. Let me pull up Rooks G's music here. Let me pull up Rooks G. And let's leave you with Sting. And I cut off his new album here. I'm going to leave you with Once and For All. Hey, was it worth it? Yeah, it's worth it if you're strong enough. All right? Keep on living out there. Livin. Peace. I love y'all. Peace. There we go. Thanks, everybody, for being here. Really appreciate you all. Thanks for stopping by the chat. Thanks for watching later, if you're watching later. Hope everybody has a wonderful week. Very great. Blessings to you. Love y'all. Peace.